Hello, my name is Jeff Farbman from the Wallace Center at Winrock International. Welcome to this shared National Good Food Network / Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative webinar. In this webinar, Community Food, Exploring Innovations in Community Food Systems, we will hear from two fantastic community food organizations. Each is a terrific example of the organizations featured in the recently released W.K. Kellogg Foundation sponsored reports. One on community food organizations in tribal communities, and one on a group of other organizations across the country. You will hear more about these later, I promise. Let me just give you a very brief technical introduction to the software to help you get the most out of today's presentation. Your webinar screen looks like this, with the slide presentation on the left and the control panel on the right. The software sometimes collapses the control panel to make it take up less of your screen. If that happens, we do suggest that you prevent it from collapsing. So if you click that little orange arrow button, it will expand. And if under the View menu, you select Auto Hide Control Panel, or rather deselect Auto Hide Control Panel, it will stay up there. We suggest that because this is the way you will communicate with us. If you'd like to ask the panelists a question, look for the questions box, type your question, and make sure you press send. If you are addressing a particular panelist, please let us know. We are recording this webinar, and it will be archived on the National Good Food Network website, ngfn.org/webinars. There are several other webinars there as well. You may want to dig through our archives. And finally, I encourage you to complete our post-webinar survey. It takes just a minute and really helps us to continue to improve our webinars and our outreach. As you can see, we have a packed agenda today. The presentation outline is on the screen now. You'll see this redisplayed as we make our way through the webinar. And we have an absolutely stellar roster of women presenting today. You can see them each here, but we'll be sure to introduce each one of them before she speaks so that it's just easier to keep track that way. So I'm going to jump right into my little formal introduction so I can get out of the way and we can hear from our panel. The Wallace Center, a business unit of Winrock International, is host of the National Good Food Network webinar series, as well as author of From the Ground Up, one of the two recently released Kellogg-funded reports. The Wallace Center has been a leading organization in the movement for a more sustainable and equitable food system for over 25 years. In particular, we're focused on advancing regional, collaborative efforts around the country to move good food, healthy, green, fair, affordable food, beyond the direct marketing realm into larger-scale wholesale channels. You can learn more about the great work of the Wallace Center at wallacecenter.org and about the National Good Food Network at ngfn.org, where, as I mentioned, you can dig into our great resources, and that includes our large collection of archived webinars. This webinar is also hosted by the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative at the University of Arkansas Law School. I'd like to introduce Erin Parker, who is the Research Director and Staff Attorney for that institution, where she assists with research, writing, and program development. She is one of the primary authors of the Intertribal Food Systems Report and is part of a team of attorneys at the initiative working to develop a full model food and agricultural code for tribes. Erin, please extend a welcome from IFAI, and then why don't you just jump right into an introduction to the Intertribal Food Systems Report.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff. Good afternoon, everybody. It is so good to be here today. The initiative is so excited to partner with Wallace Center and come together to share the work of Oneida Community Integrated Food Systems and LASAMIA, the two terrific organizations that Jeff alluded to just a few minutes ago. We are so happy to be here and to talk to you today about the reports that we have done. I'm going to jump right in here. I want to get to our awesome presenters as soon as I can, but first I wanted to just share a little bit of information, give you kind of an overview about where all the information and the reports that we're going to be talking today are coming from. So all of the information that we're sharing today comes from these two reports that you can see now on your screen, now that I've remembered to advance my slides. You can see From the Ground Up here and the Intertribal Food Systems Report. Both of these reports were commissioned by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the process of putting those reports together and kind of the work that our teams did on these reports a little bit later after we hear from our two terrific community organizations. But just for now, I'll say that from sort of a 30,000-foot perspective, these two reports were commissioned by Kellogg to surface up innovations in community food systems all across the country. We're just really looking at the dynamic, amazing work that was happening all over our country and in Indian country, changing food systems, improving community health, and just really doing terrific work for the health of people in communities all over. And that's what you can find in both of these reports. And as the teams kind of went along and did these reports, both the Wallace Center team and the initiative team sort of started to see that as we were lifting up this innovative work, people were working all across the country in kind of similar areas. And so what we did was sort these things into themes and innovation of people addressing similar sets of issues or innovating in similar ways to sort of solve different kinds of problems. And what we called these, as I said, was our themes in innovation. And you can find these themes in both the tribal report and in the national scan, the From the Ground Up report. The themes are going to be different in each report. So I wanted to start off by talking about the themes that we found as the initiative doing the tribal report. And you can see the 4 themes that we found here on your screen right now. Those were traditional foods, or food as medicine, youth development, market access, and community response to health and hunger. Just a brief high-level overview of what those themes mean. Traditional food, food and medicine, really a return to traditional foods and traditional food practices. If you're unfamiliar with tribal communities and traditional foods and kind of what that means, it's the foods that have sustained tribal people since time immemorial. They're going to be different for every tribal community, but they're deeply rooted in culture and community for a tribe as a sovereign nation. And we saw so many programs that were working to bring those back and to revitalize those foods for their people. We also saw a lot of youth development work in Indian country right now. There's so many programs that are involving youth and food systems work really from a very early age. And in Indian country, we know this goes hand in hand with culture and with revitalizing culture and extending culture and designating youth as the culture bearers for the future generations. So we saw a lot of programs that are having a traditional food component or a language component along with the food systems work that they're doing, because they want those youth to be involved from the very beginning so that they're ready to lead the next generation. We also saw market access being a pretty big theme and innovation in Indian country. A lot of tribes are in rural and remote places where maybe markets don't exist. So programs are just creating markets. They're establishing farmers markets for tribal communities, establishing food businesses for tribal communities, and just making markets where there weren't any to drive change through the health of food and agriculture systems. And lastly, but certainly not least, we saw a lot of programs that are doing a deep dive into community response to health and hunger. And those are really specific issues that these programs are focusing on, whether it's improving the health of a tribal community, on improving food access to a tribal community. There are also a lot of programs out there that are kind of thematically focusing on that. And sometimes we also see programs that are just doing all 4 of these things and really making a broad impact across a lot of areas in their food system. And I think that our presenter today really exemplifies that. So today, to really bring life to all of those themes that I just gave you a very quick overview of, we have a really wonderful speaker from Oneida Community Integrated Food Systems. We're going to be hearing from Joni Buckley. Joni is the Division Director for Internal Services for the Oneida Nation, with responsibility for various departments, including their 80-acre organic farm and cannery. She developed the framework for their 5 interrelated agricultural strategies to build on their integrated food system. She's been instrumental in the development of the Food Sovereignty Summit to share knowledge and build capacity in Indian country. And Joni, I welcome you to the webinar. I thank you so much for coming today and taking time out of your day to share with us the wonderful work that you do, and it is all yours.
Good. Great.
I think that you can.
No, it won't. It won't enter. It won't. There. Thank you. Thank you so much. Seuli, I'm honored to share our integrated food system with you, but I must start out by saying that we've been at this since 1994. So know that a food system isn't built in a day. It's rather a steady stream, a continued investment in it. And so one of the things that I wanted to share, first of all, is this kind of becomes our North Star. We ask ourselves the question, how sovereign are we if we can't feed ourselves? And how healthy are we if we're plagued with diabetes? So one of the things that we look at is when you see this graph, you see that Native Americans have the highest percentage by ethnicity of diabetes. This doesn't transition. I am having a little bit of transition problem here.
Try now.
Okay, thank you. Now.
Click on the presentation with your mouse, and then once you get it, there you go. Once you get it advancing, now you can use your keyboard.
Okay. So we're located, just to put you in perspective for the geographic location, we're in the greater Green Bay area, along with these other tribes. There are 10 other tribes there. So we're in what we call the Frozen Tundra. What we did as we began to build this integrated food system and these 5 strategies is to go back and look at our culture. So we're driven by the Three Sisters philosophy of tradition and collaboration, where the bean is the tallest corn, and she held up, the corn is the tallest sister, and she held up the bean, and the squash really was around the base to continue to care for the roots of it. So these 5 interrelated strategies, I'm going to touch on each one pretty fast, but again, they all work together, and there's a place for everybody in each one of them. So the first one deals with building a community mindset for healthy foods. One thing we know is that if we don't have a community engagement, if there's not that mindset, then you don't have a driver. You don't have the demand for healthy foods. And so that becomes a very important component. We look at the youth also as being our future. So we were very fortunate when W.K. Kellogg in First Nations gave us a grant for youth entrepreneur. That was in 2013. And today we still do it every summer. We also build events. So the Apple Orchard has a huge event with tourism, and that's open to everybody. It's a free event. We have about 8,000 people that attend. The Husking Bee, we invite different schools from around the greater Green Bay to send their children to learn how to harvest the corn, how to husk it, and they learn about the tradition and doing the corn dolls. So the other thing that we're working on now as the future is to really build some trails. So they're edible trails, and we're starting to lay those out throughout the community. That's another aspect where you can get community engagement. The second one is obviously a no-brainer. You've got to increase the local agricultural and food production. And the way that we do that also is we throw up some ideas. Some we're doing and some we're not, but we always throw up the tactics there on the board just to keep them in front of us. And then we start to develop each one of them. Oh, I'm frozen. So the first one we look at with the production is the Gingka Farm. That's the 80-acre organic farm with white corn. That's our traditional one. And we have experiential learning sessions there. We also have the large farm that has 6,000 acres. They do a lot of cash crop. They have about 150 bison and 550 Black Angus. And then we have our orchard, and we also do the cannery there. The Aquaponics is a new project that we have. We just recently started. So for part of us, it's been great. It's the blind leading the blind. So it's not without its hiccups, but it's with a lot of energy to get this done. We anchored it with the veterans, and we're growing the small lettuce so that the school kids can have fresh greens in the middle of winter. The other one that we look at is having the community gardens and the tilling services. So we charge community members like $20 to have a quarter of an acre done. What this does is it engages them to be self-sustaining, not to expect somebody else to get their food. The next one that we look at is building those local economies. And that really starts to look at Are we increasing the farmers market out there? What new projects can we put on? So we had a food center for an entrepreneurial kitchen that was on our board, just to give you an example. And I'll touch on that one a little later. But I want to show you that you've got that in your community built. For instance, our Oneida Market is also a place where other tribes can send their products so that they have a place for market. And we also have local producers that are not necessarily Native Americans, but it gives them the first step into the retail market. So we take a lot of their products and help them get into the market. The community food centers I mentioned, we've been working on this for a couple of years to try and get initial funding. So it's not like we always have the funding to do it. We have to go out and seek the funding as the next person does. And after working on this for 2 years, believe it or not, we just got a notice the day before yesterday that we got enough money for a feasibility study from EDA agency. So we want to thank Economic Development Agency for that. The next one is really looking at your outlets. So it doesn't matter how much you produce if you're not looking at the outlets within the community. And the ones that we really start to look at in that one is the school. So our school is the turtle school. That's what it looks like from the sky. But it's a matter of unraveling those big contracts and putting in the local production into it. They've put in the salad bars. We have a 4-H model where we buy from local producers and get it in there. The other one that we look at also is where are the restaurants? Where's the farmers market? Where can we put it into the elder center? So always look at your community as a whole and those outlets there, not just the retail ones that have the higher price point. Look at where the people need the access for it. And the last one is really looking at sustainable practices on it. So it doesn't, one of the things in Native American country is that we're here to care for our lands. We're here to care for them for the future generations. So as we look at issues with the lands, the phosphorus removal, the soil management, those are important components, and we take that very, very seriously because this is not our lands. These are the lands for those unborn, for the 7th generation from now. And we have to look at the sustainability, not only from the financial one, which most of them look at it, but ours is for the future generations. So I know that that was very, very, very fast. I just wanted to give you a snapshot because as you look at these 5 strategies, there's a place for every person. But it's not built in a silo. It's built holistically, integrating each piece and component. The most important thing is to always remember that this is about the community. And so we're here as servants to our community and our future generations. I invite you all to come to Oneida. We're going to have a Food Sovereignty Summit October 2nd through the 5th in Green Bay. So I needed to throw in that little plug, and that way you can see this whole system. We'll have a lot of experiential learning there. And so with that, I want to thank you so much. I know I went through it real fast, but I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A from your audience.
Joni, thank you. That was amazing, super inspirational. I do have a quick point of fact question from Alex. Are Oneida local foods in preschools and Head Start yet?
Yes, we have a system and it takes a while. One of the things that we're fortunate is that we do our own certification for food handling. So because of that, we were able to get our buffalo, our Black Angus. We have our traditional corn and corn soup in the Head Start and in the schools here, in the tribal schools here.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again, Joni. That was really wonderful. Let me now introduce my colleague, Susan Schemp. Susan brings 15 years of grassroots community-based food and agriculture experience with her to the Wallace Center. After founding the Noyo Food Forest, one of the many innovative organizations nominated for this initiative, she helped to build the community wellness programs at North Coast Opportunities, a community action agency in rural Northern California, focused on developing health, wealth, connection, and capacity through food. She's now leading the Wallace Center's community-based food systems team and is based in Little Rock, Arkansas. Susan.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And wow, thank you, Joni, for your amazing presentation. I'm so inspired by your work, and it just sounds like y'all really chose the right name for your programs as integrated community food or community integrated food systems. Clearly, y'all are really touching on every part of the food system, and I would love to come up there for your Food Sovereignty Summit. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the report that the Wallace Center co-authored with Common Market and Changing Tastes, which has this beautiful title, From the Ground Up. And, you know, we really identified a number of similar themes as found in the Intertribal Food Systems report. Clearly, you know, we just spoke a lot about return to roots, and that's one of the key themes within the From the Ground Up report as well. And, you know, there's a lot of organizations across the country that are focusing on food sovereignty and adopting traditional practices and ideas to build community through food. Another similar theme in the From the Ground Up report is around multiple points of impact. And that's really, you know, here at the center of our themes. It's where, you know, organizations are combining programmatic elements for more holistic food systems. You know, what a great example with Oneida Community Integrated Food Systems. It's really taken a holistic, systems-wide approach to food systems change and working on multiple points throughout the value chain simultaneously. Another theme that is similar as the Tribal Food Report was around investing in the future. So that's youth development through food. You know, a number of community organizations that are preparing and empowering a new diverse generation of farmers and activists and entrepreneurs to carry forth this work, the Good Food Movement, into the future. So I think, you know, if y'all can get into our reports, you'll be able to explore some of the organizations that are featured on those that have similar themes as the Intertribal report. A couple of the other ones that I want to point out around networks. So we noticed that there are a number of community-based organizations that are working in local food systems that are developing networks to support and engage and connect people, and particularly connecting people across different areas and different types of work. So there's, you know, for example, the Michigan Food Hub Network and the Women Food and Agriculture Network, which are two great examples of network building that are happening across the United States. Another theme is around policy change and organizations being really at the forefront of policy development and paving the way for creative solutions and removal of barriers in their communities and across the country. So one great example of that is the Good Food Purchasing Policy that was developed by the Los Angeles Food Policy Council and is now scaling out, which is another one of our themes across the country. The Minnesota Food Charter is another great example of, you know, amazing, innovative policy change on a statewide level. A couple other innovations I want to point out is around adaptability and replication. So there's 10 diverse projects featured in the From the Ground Up report that really identified how these organizations kind of changed course in the face of new challenges, adapted their models to changing circumstances and community needs. And I think that, you know, all of us that have done this work in communities know that we kind of have to be able to spin on a dime and address, you know, new dynamics and, you know, adapt as dynamics change in our communities. And I had mentioned before the scaling out and scaling up is another theme that was featured and kind of uncovered through this research. And that's where organizations are growing their own work within their community, so that's scaling up, or scaling out to build capacity in new organizations and other communities. I think the California Tuesdays, which is a program that was developed by the Center for Eco-Literacy, is one of the projects that's featured in our report. That's a great example of, you know, an innovation that happened in one community that was then shared with other communities across California. It's happening in a number of school districts across California now, where California products are featured on Tuesdays in the cafeterias. And finally, the last one I want to point out is around social enterprise. And this is where organizations are really applying an entrepreneurial approach to social and environmental problems and blending best practices from the private and nonprofit sector. I think a great example of that is the Farm to Freezer program in Goodwill in Michigan. And also, food hubs that have popped up around the country are great examples of social enterprise. So there's a number of them featured in our report. So, finally, I'm really excited to introduce to you an organization and a leader of an organization that really exemplifies all of these themes and innovation that were uncovered in From the Ground Up report. La Semilla Food Center is located in El Paso, Texas, and Kristen Aguilar is going to be representing them today. Kristin is the co-director of admin and policy at La Semilla Food Center, where she oversees all policy advocacy efforts and financial and administrative functions of the organization. She led the initiative to get the Las Cruces Urban Agriculture and Food Policy Plan passed and is now leading efforts for a countywide healthy food financing initiative. She is one part of a 4-woman leadership team driving La Semilla's mission of creating a fair and sustainable local food system and riding on the frontier of nonprofit development with an innovative leadership model, holistic programming, and using food systems work as a tool for racial and gender healing. Right on. Go ahead, Kristin. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Great. Thanks so much, Susan. So as Susan mentioned, we are located in the Paso del Norte region of southern New Mexico and El Paso, Texas, with our offices and farm in Anthony, New Mexico. And we operate on a shared leadership model with a mission to cultivate a fair, healthy, and sustainable food system in the region. So in order for us to drive our mission, we take a systems approach, looking at the food value chain and all the people involved holistically. Our program works in depth in multiple points of the food system, which allows not only us, but also our partners and communities to increase our understanding and our collaboration. So our programming includes a community farm whose goal isn't just production, but also acts as a community-rooted education and demonstration space. The focus is really on how to farm in the Chihuahuan Desert in a healthy and ecologically sound way. And we get this message out through workshops and various community events that we hold on the farm. Our Farm Fresh mobile market acts as both a healthy food access point for underserved communities in the area. We have a retrofitted school bus, and we make 8 weekly market stops. And it also serves as a market outlet for partner farmers in the region, providing an opportunity for increased economic activity. Our Raíces Youth Program offers a space for youth and young adults to learn about the food system through farming, marketing, ancestral health and wellness, and get leadership development training. Our La Cosecha program uses a train the model. So we provide stipends to promotoras, which are community health workers, and training in 5 different communities. And through this training and support, they're then able to offer free cooking and gardening workshops in their communities. Our Edible Education program is a school-based garden and cooking program. So we partner with 28 schools and 3 school districts here in the region to provide school garden infrastructure, in-class cooking and nutrition with monthly farm boxes and teacher professional development workshops using our place-based curriculum. And of course, we work in policy advocacy to advance local, regional, and state policies to support the local food and agriculture system, including things like urban agriculture policies and healthy food financing initiatives. So all of our programming really work together in a broad systemic way to create real change. Each of our programs also touches the access and education piece of creating this change. And you got to have both of those things in order to do that. They also work collectively within these 4 goals that drive our mission. So regenerative agriculture, we're working to ensure that the way we grow food is healthy for people, healthy for the environment, and for our communities. Community education and reciprocity raises awareness around the links between food, agriculture, economies, equity, and self-determination. And this process is really about knowledge sharing and co-creating a healthy food system. We are absolutely not doing this alone. We also actively support social enterprise development, both within and outside of our organization, really with the intent to shape the new economy. So we have business norms prioritizing social and environmental resilience. We focus on the systems that either help or impede this work through policy advocacy and engaged democracy as well. So here in the Paso del Norte region, we really do have a long and rich history of food and agriculture production. As an organization, we really strive to honor this and focus on ancestral and community-driven solutions to the issues, the very serious issues that we have of health, hunger, and food that we're working to address. An example of how we do this is to infuse ancestral health and wellness education into various aspects of our programming. For example, understanding the ebbs and flows of traditional farming practices in the desert is imperative for farming in an agroecological model and farming in a way that can adapt to the changing climate and environmental conditions that we're experiencing everywhere, and particularly here in the region. And it's incredibly important in creating this resilience so we can continue to, feed ourselves and regain food sovereignty. Through our youth programming, we integrate ancestral health and wellness and really dig into traditional foods and the topics that we cover. This ends up having a twofold impact. So one, we have young people learning about recipes, foods, and medicinal plants. So, now they know how to cook with nopal or amaranth and how to make a healing salve with chaparral. But what is also happening that is incredibly amazing is they're becoming empowered and tapping into the pride and knowledge that they and their parents and their grandparents and ancestors are inherently valuable and knowledgeable. This sense of pride and empowerment is only becoming more and more important for all of our communities, but especially for immigrants, Latino, and communities of people of color. Blessemia really operates on the understanding that our community has the wisdom and ability to determine our own food destiny. Our programming evolves based on the input and needs of our community and operates in our shared values of things like dignity, supporting and celebrating local food and the people who grow it, and respecting and reviving cultural traditions and innovations. We don't create these programs in a vacuum and then go and drop them in the communities. Everything that we do is, there's this feedback loop between us and our communities. And just as important as our direct services and programming is our policy advocacy work. So we work at the local, regional, and state level to ensure that policies that are governing us actively support and incentivize a healthy local food system that's rooted in equity. So at the state level, we work with many amazing partners across New Mexico. And we support policies like the Double Up Food Bucks program and the New Mexico Grown Produce for School Meals program. Both of these work to direct state dollars into programs that match SNAP benefits at farmers markets and that give school districts money to buy New Mexico grown produce to use in school meals. It's incredibly important that we advocate for elected officials to not just support resolutions or memorials, of course, both of which are incredibly important and really set the stage for, our collective values, but to direct public dollars to actively support local food systems work. Put your money where your mouth is, as they say. At the regional level, we've worked, for example, with Doña Ana County. The county's updated 20-year comprehensive plan has sections and language specifically supporting local agriculture, healthy local food access, and health equity, as does the City of Las Cruces' comprehensive plan. The City of Las Cruces also adopted the Las Cruces Urban Agriculture and Food Policy Plan last June, And that really sets the bar for supporting and incentivizing urban agriculture activities in the city. And it was the first of its kind in New Mexico. And that one was really exciting to see passed. Currently, we're working on a healthy food financing initiative, or HFFI campaign, in Doña Ana County and Las Cruces. This would create a low-interest revolving loan and grant fund for small businesses and individuals to get healthy food access in underserved communities. And this campaign is really a great example of the systems thinking and holistic and community-based nature of our work. So we began this 2 years ago, really, with community meetings to determine what folks wanted and needed in terms of healthy food access. We knew we had a problem in our county with a lot of folks lacking access to healthy food. So what do they want to do about it? How can we help? And the HFFI grew out of that as a way to get funds and access to capital into the communities and to the individuals that need it the most, and that have really traditionally been cut off from such resources. The HFFI would fund things like grocery stores or renovating corner stores to be able to store fresh, healthy foods, of course, but it would also fund projects that make the most sense for our very rural, spread out communities. Doña Ana's fairly low population, and it's also very large in area. So this would support things like farm stands or small scale production to get healthy food access into communities. And in addition to the funds themselves, development services like business planning and marketing would be offered free of charge to help ensure success long term for these people, getting the loans or opening businesses. Another piece of this is that part of our advocacy efforts around it involve an opportunity for promotoras and other interested community members to receive stipends and training in our leadership development and policy advocacy training. They focus on policy advocacy, community organizing, and these promotoras really are leading our grassroots efforts for this advocacy campaign in their communities. And through all of our work and all of our programs, what we're really doing is investing in the future. We focus on youth development through programming and find opportunities for growth. So we recently sent a few youth who are in our Raíces program and our apprentices to the Rooted in Community Conference in North Carolina. There's incredible gratification and pride in reading the reflections on the trip and hearing feedback from adults at the conference. When you have young people, especially young people of color, talking about feeling empowered and finding their voice and beginning to consider things like college, which might never have crossed their mind before, that is some incredibly powerful stuff and something very much worth investing in. We also often end up providing a space of learning and development on things that we didn't necessarily plan on. So for example, we had an intern from a community college, a gentleman in his mid-50s, who had decided to go to college for the first time, get a degree in public health, and what happened when he came in was he ended up needing a lot of coaching in basic computer skills, something, it's really important in this day and age. And these are the things that are worth taking the time to do because we're really working on development for our community at large. And through our HFFI efforts, we're working to create economic development at the grassroots level, looking towards a generational shift and a system shift so that we really value our communities and what they have to offer in the long term. And in tandem with all of this, we link education with economic opportunities through programs like our mobile market. So for example, when our mobile market bus stops in a rural community, we're providing education and outreach through recipes and food tastings at the bus. We're increasing access to healthy local food in areas that don't have a grocery store for miles in some cases, accepting SNAP, doubling SNAP benefits with Double Up Food Bucks programs. And we're also selling the produce of small growers along with our own through the bus, really providing another outlet for income generation. All of that is investing in the future of our communities for economic, environmental, personal, and community health. And really the most valuable part of our work is the people we're able to reach and work with and learn from, and the people who make La Semilla stronger through their contributions. We had 2 young people, Shaggy and Valerie, that started out in our Raíces youth program a couple of years ago. Both of them then went on to apprentice with us on our farm and the mobile farmers market. And now I'm very happy to say both of them are employed as program assistants at La Semilla. You know, they're part of our team now. And in fact, most of our employees are from the communities that we serve. Another community member, America Terrazas, has been actively involved and partnering with us through several years in various forms, helping us pull together community meetings in her community. She's now promotora, both leading cooking and gardening workshops in her community and acting as a grassroots organizer for the HFFI campaign. These stories and many more are much richer and deeper than I have the time to go into today. But suffice it to say that La Semilla is what it is today because of the communities, the partners, and the people around us, for sure. And with that, I can say that you can find us on all the social media outlets and our website. And I want to thank you all so very much for the opportunity to share our work with you today.
Wow, Kristen, thank you so much. I am incredibly inspired by the work of La Semilla, and I think y'all were just a really great example of the innovation themes that were uncovered through both of these reports. And you just really want to thank you and Joni both for sharing your work with us. And I think it probably gave a lot of people out there listening a lot of ideas. Maybe you have some questions. So we have saved quite a bit of chunk of a time this afternoon for us to have a conversation and answer your questions that you might have for any of the speakers today. So I'm just going to point you to the chat box where you can submit your questions. And I think Jeff will chime in if he has any that he can share with the whole group. I was going to start us out with this kind of provocative quote from Paula Daniels, who's the founder of the Los Angeles Food Policy Council. And you know, they recognized really early on that their urban effort to achieve good food for all required partnerships and required partnering with surrounding agricultural communities to be successful. And you know, I know that this is a real essential part of both Oneida and La Semilla's work. And I wonder if Joni and Kristin could kind of speak to how you've been collaborating with other organizations. You both mentioned, you know, both government, tribal and municipal governments, private companies, and perhaps even some unlikely allies that you've worked with to help further your food systems work in your communities. And I'm curious if you have any best practices or lessons learned that you could share with us.
So this is Joni with the Oneida Nation. I can probably touch on several, but I'm going to synthesize that to a couple of them. One of the things that we've started is when we have concepts and ideas, sometimes we bounce them off universities or academics. We invited some of the universities to come and to look at our systems so that as they're doing research and working in this space, and they come up with ideas that they speak to us. So the University of Wisconsin-Madison has helped us with the food center concept. The UW Extension helped us with the value-added grant for the white corn. NWTC, which is another college here, is helping with a yield study. We also have the co-ops that we're promoting and encouraging people to start to build their own co-ops. And then we bring in some external partners to help them jumpstart them. And we also are very thankful to WK Kellogg, to First Nations, to USDA, who have always given us that seed money through grants. Oh, we've worked for it, believe me. I know they're very competitive. But if it weren't for those grants or that seed money that they're investing, I don't think we would have jump-started a lot of our initiatives.
Yeah, we have, our work often, you can't do this work without a lot of partners. We have partners in, local governments, as I mentioned, other nonprofits in the area, folks doing beginning farmer training, a lot of people and a lot of partnerships. I think it's important to kind of do a scan and figure out what exists and then figure out how to partner, which sounds like very basic, but it is. But it's also important to remember that you're not going to partner with everything with everybody on everything, and that's okay. We worked with, our health department and other people who might not be interested, in agriculture, for example, but are really interested in health promotion programs. I think as food systems work, we were really able to touch on a lot of different facets of issues, everything from hunger to health to equity and social justice, to social enterprise, marketing, business, agriculture. So the potential for partnerships is really large, and it's really important to just reach out to people and start building those relationships and seeing where things overlap in your community.
There's a question out here from the audience on the Lasomia feedback loop. Rosa wants to know, how does the feedback loop work? Are there particular tools you use to make sure it works well?
Yeah, so we have a few different ways of really listening to this and implementing that. A couple of them for our more institutional programs, for example, our edible education program. So the way that we receive feedback on that from the community that we're working in is very different than the way we receive feedback on, say, our La Cosecha program. So because we're working within the school systems, it's a lot more institutional and set up in a very particular structure. So teachers are able to give us feedback on, is the curriculum working for them? Is it working for their students, through things like surveys and in-person interviews with them throughout the whole process. But then whenever we're talking about programs like La Cosecha or the mobile market, where we're out in the community, things are often a lot more malleable and movable and not quite as structured. We've had to learn to be okay with that. And so a lot of what we do is, it's been a lot of relationship building and then learning to listen to the people who are in our programs and use them as ambassadors to bring information back to us. So we do hold fairly frequently, every once in a while, a lot of community meetings. We work with partners that are already doing community meetings or have groups that are interested in our work, and we listen. We spend a lot of time listening to what's needed. So a lot of it is community meetings. A lot of it is surveys and feedback at our mobile farmers market. For example, we do dot surveys to figure out if the mobile market is helpful to people, if it's increasing their access to good food. And we also look at, our quantitative information that we gather. So are sales increasing at the mobile farmers market, and what does that mean? And what, how are they buying food? Is it with cash? Is it with SNAP? What are we really doing to increase that access? So we actually have, the way we receive feedback is entirely dependent on the programs that we're working in. On our farm, are we helping small farmers? Do more farmers have access to market outlets? Are our workshops helpful to them? What do they want to hear? So we use a variety of different ways to really implement that and then allow that to guide and feed into our programs.
Wow, that is excellent, comprehensive, very responsive to the community. If I can just ask one more, Rachel has a question for Joni. She's pointing out that it seems that there's really good tribal support with the work that you're doing. She asks, how do you achieve that? Do you have tribal legislation in place to support the initiatives? And if you do, were they in place before you started your programs, or only as you went along?
I think that one of the things we look at, and thank you, there is quite a bit of tribal support. One of the things in tribes is that we've got so many different needs. Healthcare is a big one. If the tribe is isolated or remote location, it's difficult. But one of the drivers here has been that the tribal leadership or the council is also engaging in this. And about 5 years ago, one of our vice chairman at that time was really interested in agriculture and kind of helped us elevate it. And so because of that and explaining everything, I was able to articulate his vision with some of the strategies. And I think that the going from a vision to being able to articulate it is probably a crucial element. And so we're all marketeers in one way or the other. And the first thing that we did is to start building a lot of collateral pieces. I mean, we have more rack cards and posters to get that message out. And so it wasn't very costly. But if people can't see it, just like this PowerPoint, if you don't see the visual, sometimes you're not in the same space. You don't see it. So we were very fortunate with our tribal leadership and also with our present leadership. We just had a change, and we have a new chairman who is very attuned to agriculture and the impact of agriculture in creating a healthy community.
Great, Erin.
Great. Thank you, Joni. And Jeff, do we have any more questions from the crowd before we move on?
There are some great ones. I didn't know if you want to.
Well, if you want to, we'll start this youth discussion, and then we'll move back to the crowd. Will that work?
Sounds great. Yeah.
Perfect. So one of the things I know that's really important to both Oneida and Blesamia is working with multiple generations with children, and children all the way up to adults. And we've got, this is another really provocative quote, I think this time from John Hendricks, who is with Choctaw Fresh Produce. That's a community-based farming operation that's owned by the tribe. It's owned and operated by the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians in Choctaw, Mississippi. And it provides on-farm educational opportunities for tribal youth. And they do a lot of youth work. And so John said that it's really important and spills over to multiple generations from kids to elders. And I was wondering, Kristen and Joni, if you could talk to us a little bit about working with youth and how that's central to your success. And if you have any stories, I know Kristen, you shared definitely some stories of the youth that you've been working with, of stories that have intergenerational impact that you've been witnessing in your work. And if you have any words of wisdom to share with the folks who are listening about working with youth in food systems.
Well, Kristen, if you want, this is Joni, and I'll just jump in if because I'll be real fast on it. A couple of the things that we do with youth is we really focus on them. We've got community gardens for the youth outside of their school because they're very tactical. So we look at that. We have a youth day on the farm for the 6th graders where they go to the large commercial farm. You saw a picture of the event with the husking bee, and this is not just for the tribal youth. This is for the kids from all the other schools. They just sign up and bring the busload over. And so it's important for them to at least see it. We also have the youth entrepreneur that we do every year, and they did their own little trail mix. And that was an outreach from a grant that we got, and we've continued that on. And then in the summer, we have internships with the college youth, and they're in our areas helping. One is in Aquaponics, and they're helping out there in that startup so that they can align some of the things that we're doing with their studies. The summit is also going to feature youth in agriculture. So we've invited youth from different tribes that are in school, college, to talk about their careers and where they're headed and some of the studies that they're doing. And just to show you how we try and always move to the next level, we have a youth coloring book that's like from 6-year-olds. And so we've shared that with other tribes so that they can take the concept and adapt it to their own culture. So we're very open about that. And then we've been shopping around to develop this augmented reality concept. And as we said about partnerships, it's very difficult sometimes because I've probably met with 8 different people and we still don't have it aligned. But we know what we're trying to do, and it's just a matter of continuing to find the right partnership that can keep the youth engaged in healthy foods. When they're 10 years old, that's when they really start to understand totally what they're putting in their bodies, and that's the age that you definitely need to capture them on. So you can start young, but make sure that at that age of 10, you have them in the fold for healthy foods.
Yeah, I would say we work with youth, everything from elementary, occasionally preschool, up through, young adults, 20, 21. Every age is a little bit different, and every age requires a little bit of a different approach, I think. It's great seeing kids' excitement in the garden when they're in elementary school, and then, dealing with people when they start trying to get a little apathetic in middle school and high school. But I think one of the most important things is, just keep going. I think you're reaching kids even whenever you're not receiving direct feedback from them in the moment. And you just have to have heart. And I say that both as knowing how some of our programs go and how, as a mom of 2 teenage boys, we occasionally work with a juvenile citation program here in the area, and we'll get feedback afterwards, and some of them are like, this was amazing. They'll come out to our farm and they're just super excited. And, then some of them are like, this sucked, like, or it's hot, this and that. So I think that the point is that it's, you just got to keep going. And kids really are like the doorway into their families and into their communities. Kids have sway with their parents. We've had so many families be brought into the fold of La Semilla and other programming because their children were involved in our programs. And I've said so often, I wish I could just bottle up like the passion that teenagers and young adults have, because the world would be changed overnight if you just like get that and bottled up. We have worked with some amazing kids, and I think most of the time they just want an opportunity to make a difference. And if you are thoughtful and you're looking for that, you can find that virtually anywhere. And so, yeah, I think working with kids is probably one of the most rewarding things that you can do.
There are a couple questions about sort of program design and evaluation for both of you. So maybe Kristin, we'll start with you. Can you give a sense of how you design a new program or the suite of programs? Do you start from a logic model? Do you have timelines? And if you could give us some insight into how you collect metrics of impact metrics.
Oh yeah, okay. That's a big question.
Sure is.
It depends on the program. So our 2 oldest programs are our Raíces program, our youth program, and our edible education school-based program. Both of those are radically different than when they started 7 years ago. So we started our edible education program with direct services. We were in the classrooms, we were in the gardens leading classes for students. We were in, I think, about 7 schools at the beginning, 2 and then 7 the second year. Our model on that has changed drastically. We've had interest from so many people and getting so many phone calls. So what we've done in order to increase our impact without having to increase our staff exponentially is to shift to focusing on teacher professional development. So now we're working with schools directly. The principal has to sign on plus at least 5 teachers. So we're not doing direct services. We're not teaching in the schools, but we're giving teachers, the professional development, all the tools to do that. So a lot of it, honestly, is we go in with our best efforts, our best educated guesses, like this is the problem, this is a need, and this is a need we can fill through this. So sometimes it's looking, for example, the Edible Ed, it was looking at other garden and in-class cooking programs across the country, knowing we'd had to adapt it to our area and then figuring out how to do that. And we pilot it and oh my gosh, it's great, but it's not going to work long term. So how do we shift it so that it works? It's trial and error. And a lot of it is driven by, for example, the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, the Mobile Farmers Market. Those grew out of programming that we had previously and community meetings where people said, we want this and we need this. And so we tried to fill that need, looking at best practices from across the country and being not too afraid anyway to fail, because that happens. And we adjust as best we can to shift things. And we have a pretty robust evaluation plan using qualitative and quantitative data for all of our programs individually, and then also for our organizational structure. So it's quite a document that we spent a lot of time on last year. And we do really make a point to focus on both the qualitative and the quantitative. For example, we'll do pre and post surveys for teachers or students or participants. We do case studies, so in-person interviews and collecting stories from people. We'll have storytelling sessions, which is really exciting. We did a great one where we had a lot of our participants come in, and it was basically facilitated storytelling, and it was all captured by an artist who was drawing on a huge sheet of like white butcher paper with marker and made this beautiful, beautiful visual story of all of the input from all of these people. So that's not a lot of specific detail because I think that's a little too tedious, but that's kind of generally how we design programs and how we evaluate programs.
Mm-hmm. Joni, do you want to give us some insight into your design and evaluation process?
Sure, I'd love to. Everyone also for us is a little different. So the first question is the measurement really, is it a grant? So most grants always have their evaluation. And so they look at the logic model, they look at their metrics also, but you have your scope. And so depending on that scope, we can tweak it and we can find some qualitative and quantitative measures out of that. But the question also becomes when we're putting in a new program is there a social value that's going to trump a capitalistic mindset? And I say that in a nice way, only because sometimes you won't be able to measure it immediately. If you're looking at school lunches, it's easy to measure the input, the consumption, the waste. Those are easy numbers. How much are you putting into the school? Those are quantitative measures that are easy to look at. Do the surveys really tell you what they truly mean? Or are you looking at a decrease in the diabetes from the health center? Are you looking at less people having to go there for checkups? Is the age group for diabetics going lower and lower to 10-year-olds, or are we capturing it at that? And then the other thing that we have is, it's easy to count the number of cars that go through a fast food restaurant and see how many have tribal tags. It's not as easy to hear the stories from the youth to the parents saying, no, let's try this. So you may not be able to measure it this year, but you know, as you continue, you've got to keep pushing until you can measure that social value of changing a mindset. A mindset is very, very hard to change, and it's very rewarding once you do.
Besides grants, what are some funding sources for other communities to start this work?
I can go ahead. We do have foundation grants, large and small, and making partnerships with foundations in your area is really important. We also have, I think, a good source to look at for organizations are contracts. So government contracts, we have some, locally to do health and outreach services, for example, for a county, or working with the state to do similar things, in addition to, the fundraising and individual donations as well. We're also working on looking at sustainability, like sustainability in nonprofits is kind of, one of those silly things. That's just not the point of it, to be financially sustainable. But we're also, looking at ways, how do we create income sources through social enterprise within the organization. So how do schools, after they go through our 3-year program, continue to fund themselves so that they can keep doing edible education programming? How do we fund is that like sponsorships, people sponsoring gardens, approaching small businesses or individuals to sponsor gardens? Is it, value-added products that our youth make and market, so we can then fund our Raices program, something like salsas or salves or something similar. So we're starting to really delve into, just within the past year, that social enterprise piece internally, and figuring out, what resources do we have and what is a need that we can fill to begin generating income that way.
This is Joni, and sometimes what you really need is somebody to pay it forward. And that's probably more of where we're trying to go. For example, a couple of times some people have come to previous summits, and then once they leave, it's like, how do we start? How do we do this? So we're just a phone call away. And the idea is that those who have already gone on the journey also have a responsibility to help those who are starting their journey by letting them know where the landmines are. To start a community garden, it doesn't take a lot of money, but what it takes is the engagement. And so we have always been very open about sharing all the information, the how to do it, and especially the how not to do it. So I would say, aside from grants, everything has a cost, but the mental investment is the biggest cost that you'll ever have, and the biggest success. So I encourage everybody, we look more at mentor proteges, and we encourage everybody to call or to find somebody that can help you on your journey. Partnerships.
Well, I love ending the Q&A section on that word. That was wonderful.
Yes.
Erin,
yes, I do. Thank you so much, Joni and Kristen. Thank you again for your presentations and for ending us on such an uplifting note, talking about partnerships. That was absolutely wonderful. I have really enjoyed hearing about both of your organizations. I think probably everybody who sat in today has learned so much from you, and I hope that there are folks in the audience who are thinking about partnerships and possibly maybe you'll get some new partners. I think that would be really, really amazing to come out of this work. And what I wanted to do to sort of close us out, I said I was going to talk a little bit about the project and the process that we kind of went through. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I really do want to leave us on that amazing uplifting note and not on a bunch of nerdery about research methodologies and process, even though I wear my nerd hat proudly. I definitely want to leave us on that partnership note, but just a quick note about how we did this. So both of our teams at Wallace Center and the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative, after the W.K. Kellogg Foundation commissioned us to write these reports a few years ago, we worked together to create sort of a parallel research and nomination process for the reports. And both of us started with a survey process, and after that we turned to I'll call it crowdsourcing. I think that's a good word for it. I kind of like the partnership aspect of that. We turned to some crowdsourcing from food systems experts, and we did that just to kind of round out our nomination list and make sure that we had a really robust list of nominees for both of the reports. And the reports, which you can see here again on your screen, both of those reports are really the product of that collaborative survey and research process that we went through. Both of these documents together highlight over 100 different innovative programs across the country. And these programs, I think you've gotten just a taste of the amazing programs that are out there today from Oneida and from La Semilla on the call. And they're just, all of the programs that are in this report are rooted in their communities. They're making change in their communities, in the health of their people and their community members and their food systems, and you can read all about it in these reports. I did want to note that, these reports, both of them are a snapshot. I think all of us who work in food systems know just how dynamic this work is and how it grows and changes every day. And that's certainly true here. I know I've been on this project since the beginning on our team, and I could still be writing this report today talking about new stuff that's happening in Indian country and new exciting innovations that are occurring in Indian country food systems. And I'm certain that that's true on the Wallace Center side for their team as well, that this work is just so dynamic. And I think that the reports are a really good, exciting way to dive into that dynamic work if that's a thing that you're interested in. And I hope after hearing from our terrific partners that is a thing you want to do. If you want to read the reports, you can log on to this website that I've got right up here at the top on this slide. If you don't happen to be looking at it, it's www.communityfood.wkkf.org. That's the website that's hosting these reports. Both the tribal report and the From the Ground Up national report can be downloaded for free on this website. You can also explore a couple of different tools that the W.K. Kellogg has supported through this website. There's some really cool, innovative stuff going on here, and I wanted to show you what it was before I jump back to showing you the web address. This is an interactive map that they built of all of the projects. And you can see here, it's just a static shot on my screen. It's not interactive on my screen, but if you go to that website, it will be interactive. All of the little green markers here are the tribal projects that were profiled in the tribal report that our team did, and all of the pink dots here are from the national scan. All of those dots represent innovations in food systems work, which I think is just really amazing. This interactive feature on the website is really cool. You can go over and search both by geographic location, and you can also search by all of those thematic innovations that Susan and I both discussed. So if you're interested in a particular theme, you can navigate on over there and you can search by theme as well as place, which is really neat. And so there's that website one more time before I turn it over to Susan. You can go over to communityfood.wkkf.org to learn about the work of Oneida, to learn about the work of La Semilla, and all of the other amazing innovations that are profiled in both of these reports. And before I turn it back over to Susan, I did want to give just a quick plug for some cool things we've got going on at the initiative. If you're interested in the tribal food report, if you go to this website and you read it and you want to learn more about the themes, our team is going to be doing a series of webinars on each theme, and we'll be starting those next month. We don't have the dates fully firmed up yet, but if you go to our website, indigenousfoodandag.com, you'll be able to keep an eye on our rolling list of dates for all of those webinars, and hopefully you can tune in and hear from some more amazing organizations like Oneida who've been working in Indian country to change the game on food systems. And just lastly, if our team also, we travel a lot. We're based here in Arkansas, but we go all around Indian country, and we're doing that this year, doing a series of food safety trainings. So if we've got folks out there in the audience who are growing food and they're interested in doing some certifications for the Food Safety Modernization Act, which I know a lot of us who grow are interested in that produce rule, we are training on that, and we're going to be all around the country. If you go to our website, indigenousfoodandag.com, there's a food safety tab right at the top, and it'll take you to our training schedule, and you can see when we're going to be out there near you. So I hope to see you out in the field. But for now, I'm going to turn it back over to Susan and thank everyone for listening in, and thank our speakers for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erin. And I just really appreciate Joni kind of teeing me up in a way to present this last little teaser to those of you who are still listening. The Wallace Center this fall is going to be starting a new community of practice to really forge those relationships between all of you out there working in community-based food systems to really support one another, share best practices, and help each other as we continue this work forward. I know that in my own professional experience, I have had mentors who have helped me along the way, and there's just so much wisdom throughout this movement that we want to create a space for us to share, what really works and what doesn't, and to build our leadership skills and our operations and management skills as we continue, growing local food systems across the United States. So stay tuned for more information coming soon this fall from the Wallace Center on this new community of practice. And finally, just want to leave y'all with a save the date on the 2018 National Good Food Network Conference that the Wallace Center is going to be hosting in Albuquerque, New Mexico in March of next year. We are really excited about the Food Hub Conference kind of taking one step out and looking at the full food system and the full value chain and all the different actors and community members and organizations that are involved in building the good food movement across the United States. So we hope that you'll join us in Albuquerque next year, and just want to really thank you all for participating in this webinar today.
All right. I add my thanks. Remind you to give us your feedback on the post-webinar survey that should pop right up in your browser right after this, and wish you all a great day. This concludes the webinar.